know, I've lost count. You know, I've talked to governors, I've talked to the White House, I've talked to all our partners. I talked to Ken Graham earlier to make sure we have the latest weather. This is the typical drumbeat of how we do it. And again, now, as we run out of time to prepare, those residents that live down there that are under threat of Delta, you know, the clock is ticking. And my message today is finish those preparations and hunker down. And again, heed the directions of your local emergency managers, your local elected officials. If told to evacuate, please do so.
Any other advice you have for the people? I've got to imagine there's fatigue, which makes people, you know, maybe not pay as much attention as they should. What else do you want people to know in terms of if this storm is a second rough punch for these areas that were hit so hard, and what FEMA will do to help them after the fact?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hurricane fatigue. Please don't be complacent. You know, please don't say, yeah, well, I survived Sally, I survived Laura, I'll survive this next one. Please don't do that. Take it seriously. You know, think about you may have to go a little bit farther this time because we have a lot of the survivors from Laura that are in hotels and motels in the region, and you may be the next one to be displaced. So be prepared to move into a hotel or to go extra distance because there's lack of sheltering in the region just because the Gulf Coast has gotten beaten up these past months. So, and be COVID ready, be COVID safe. Make sure you have a mask. Make sure you have hand and sanitizer. Make sure you're ready to take care of you and yourself. You know, you're gonna, you know, you could be potentially impacted by Delta from a hurricane. Don't give yourself a double threat by being impacted by COVID-19. Be ready for both things.
A lot of complications this year. FEMA Administrator Pete Gaynor, we thank you so much for joining us. I know you guys have your hands full this week and really this season, so thank you for your time. We get you a look at what's happening right now with the storm, and we've got a Category 3 hurricane once again on our hands. So Delta has re-strengthened back up to 115-mile-per-hour winds as it makes its way closer to the U.S. coast. And once again, as Pete just said, we are looking at parts of Louisiana to likely suffer the hardest hit. Forecast as we get into the afternoon and evening tomorrow, that's when we're anticipating landfall. Could still be a major hurricane by that point. Then luckily moving quickly, but spreading that heavy wind threat inland. We'll be right back.
Perrier, the original spark.
I feel golden. I feel like glitter on my shoulders. I feel golden. I feel like, oh.
Boldly refreshing since 1863.
Yeah, that's half the fun of a new house, seeing what people left behind in the attic.
Well, saving on homeowners insurance with Geico's help was pretty fun, too.
Oh, it's a tiny dancer.
They left a ton of stuff up here.
Well, enjoy your house.
Nope.
Every day, only on Quibi.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on the Weather Channel. If you want to know what real Louisiana looks like, just look at this behind me. Clearing skies for the time being. We got high clouds, but it really hasn't been that bad of a weather day. We had a couple of showers, didn't last too long. Other than that, it's been overall dry, so great for preparations. But we talk about Louisiana, and of course, New Orleans brings to mind, Baton Rouge, Lake Charles, Lafayette. Those are the population centers, but the majority of the coastline actually looks like this. And cypress swamps are so important because they act as a buffer from the populated areas and can trap a lot of that surge. Think about all these cypress trees. They can handle hurricanes, and these have lived through many. In fact, Laura just recently, but they kind of take that surge. This can handle water rises, especially here out on Lake Martin and all across the swamp, Mike. And so it's extremely crucial to have these natural buffers to protect against that rising water. We know surge and wind is going to be a huge factor when it comes to Delta. What kind of winds are we looking at, Mike, and when are we expecting the worst of the winds to arrive?
You know, I think for a place like I-10, and when you're sitting there about 50 miles or so from the water, Chris, I think you're going to get those hurricane-force winds likely tomorrow evening, and maybe even after sunset tomorrow. And those winds could be gusting over 75 miles an hour and potentially even higher than that. It's going to depend exactly where the eye comes in, but I'd say we're locked in for hurricane force gust. Right now we have 115 mile per hour winds with a category 3, and I want to show you the forecast cone here because where Chris is right about here. Breaux Bridge is right by Lafayette. I know we're kind of, you bisect this cone, we're on that right side of the cone, but this side of the cone, the highest impacts will be on this side if the hurricane goes right down the center of this cone. And you can see what the forecast wind speed is just offshore, 120 miles per hour. So I think we've got a pretty significant wind maker in a tight core, all right? The hurricane force winds field is not really large. It's fairly compact, but if you look at this, and this shows you the outline of the forecast cone here and where the 110 plus mile per hour winds could be, that might be very close to Lake Charles, and it might be very close to Lafayette and right where Chris is as well. That could extend even farther north there, and we think it's a pretty certain thing that we're going to see 74 plus mile per hour wind gusts here, and I think that Lafayette, maybe even Baton Rouge up toward Alexandria, you're a target for that as well. So a lot of different areas here where wind becomes an issue. Also answering some of your questions that you've got at home. This one from Nikki. In terms of avoiding potential flooding, down power lines, and other property damage when returning home, would it be better for people in coastal Louisiana to evacuate east or west? I think that's another really good question. I'm going to go back to the cone here and show you that there are some areas where I think you're more likely to, I think you're probably safer to go west than you are to go east, because gradually we think the hurricane will make a turn off to the east here. It's going to get picked up by the jet stream here. So if you're evacuating and you're like, okay, do I go east on I-10 or do I go west on I-10? I think if you're sitting here in Lafayette, I still think you've got time to go to New Orleans. If you're sitting maybe in a place like Lake Charles, I think it's easier for you, quicker for you to go westbound here, more toward Houston than to going toward Lafayette or New Orleans, all right? And I think you're going to encounter a lot more wind on this side of the hurricane than you will on this side of the hurricane, a lot more rain and surge on that side as well. So if you're in a place like Lake Charles, go west. Alex?
All right, thanks. And then we got to talk about the severe threat as well. Could see some strong storms today and, of course, into tomorrow as that storm moves in, makes landfall. Severe weather tends to accompany these, and tomorrow will be no exception. Delta will be no exception in terms of that risk. We look at where the system is now, of course, out over the Gulf of Mexico, and we are watching some of those thunderstorms extend into parts of the state of Louisiana right now. Also getting into parts of southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, even the western part of Florida Panhandle getting in on some storms with that right front quadrant. So when we look at a storm make landfall, where the center of the storm is, that northeast side, that's usually our hot spot for tornadoes, for severe weather that would come along with this storm. So being prepared for that threat in addition to the others, so important. We have those winds from the southeast at the surface. However, you go a little higher up and those winds become a little bit more southerly with height. So actually have some wind shear, and so many times we talk about wind shear allowing those storms to develop some rotation. So Torcon values of 2 into tonight. Again, not crazy high. We're not expecting tons of them, but know that the storms could produce tornadoes. And then we get you into tomorrow, of course, 3 out of 10 on the Torcon from Lafayette to Baton Rouge, all the way down to a place like Grand Isle, Mike.
Just one more threat that we have to follow, right? Well, still to come here on Weather Underground, our coverage of Delta continues as it strengthens and closes in on the Gulf Coast. We're going to take you back live to Louisiana. Preparations ongoing in advance of what is going to be a dangerous hurricane landfall. We're back after this.
1 in 2 kids is under high